In 2023, Americans lost over $4.5 billion to crypto investment scams, according to the FBI. And a huge share of that came from a scheme known as pig butchering. These scams exploit trust, loneliness, and ambition, and they've devastated people from every walk of life. Today, we're joined by Erin West. She spent 26 years as a deputy district attorney in Silicon Valley. Now she's the president and founder of Operation Shamrock, a global coalition fighting back, uniting law enforcement, tech companies, banks, and victim advocates to go after the networks behind these crimes. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we met at the Eve Wealth Conference where I heard you speak, and I had full body chills listening to everything you were talking about. I think everyone, has heard of scams these days, but I was not really aware of pig butchering scams and just the real sort of brutal, like just how devastating in particular these are and just the scale of the operation behind them. So I'm so glad that you've come on the show today to talk to us and tell our listeners more about what is going on. You spent 26 years as a prosecutor in Santa Clara County, which is home to some of the biggest tech companies. So looking back, I mean, what kind of cybercrime were you dealing with in the early days?
Yeah, I spent 26 years as a prosecutor, and so I covered a lot of different crimes. But the last 8 years, I spent on the high-tech team. And so when we first started doing these high-tech cases, they were things like people putting skimmers in a gas station pump and taking your credit card information, or really advanced identity theft cases. And then we started to see an evolution to a group of scammers who knew how to take over your cell phone service. And that was called SIM swapping. And
Yeah.
people would wake up and they'd realize, oh, I don't have access to my phone service. And oh my God, my cryptocurrency account has been drained. And so we were one of the first teams in the nation to look at what SIM swapping was and to try to help victims who had lost a significant amount of money overnight. When the advent of cryptocurrency meant that really bad guys could get access to millions in seconds and move that money quickly and pseudo-anonymously. Recently, well, I say recently, but over the past 3 years, as a nation, we've been hit with scams. I think everybody listening to this podcast will be able to identify with getting a text that seems to be directed to another person, like, can you pick me up from the airport today? Or a scam that is a job scam, or you have a thing to pick up at UPS, or you owe money for tolls. And we're getting hit nonstop by scams.
Yeah, I think I have it, probably those text messages, and the ones you specifically mentioned, the toll ones, the job ones, pretty much every other day, it seems like I'm getting these texts. And it's interesting how universal that is. Like you said, like most people like, oh yes, the toll ones. It is so widespread. Or there was another one about a guy that shared a picture of a cute puppy, like, oh, can you help? Like, he's injured. This is the number I was given for the hospital. And, it's like, oh, that isn't the number. But then, then they're trying to spark up conversation. And it's like, oh, okay, that's an interesting way to start this. So that was a bit more novel. That absolutely, I, experienced those. And yeah, it happens constantly. So was there like a case or a moment where it hit you that's like, this is sort of another level of what we've been seeing before, or, this is really more widespread and damaging than what we've previously experienced?
Definitely, yes. First of all, I want to acknowledge that example about the puppies. That's what they do. They really come after things that will pull on your heartstrings. Like, who isn't concerned about an injured puppy? One
Yeah.
of the earliest texts I got was, I'm trying to set an appointment for the vet. My dog is not eating his food. And so, like, they're trying to get any kind of response. And so what I noticed when I first got into this 3 years ago was the difference was now that people were losing every penny they had. That was the difference. We were used to a romance scam situation. We'd seen it before where someone is pretending to be someone on an oil rig or someone that can't get home and needs money. And I understood that, and I understood people could lose significant amounts of money. But this new scam that I was hearing about, the first case we got was in 2022, and it was a 30-year-old software engineer. And he seemingly had everything. He had a great job. He had a nice nest egg. And he was just really looking for someone to share his life with. He met someone on a dating app, began talking to her, and had every reason to believe that this was a legit person that he was going to marry one day. And these scammers are really good at this. And they have answers for all of your questions about why can't we meet in person yet. And so what happened is ultimately after a significant amount of time talking to this person, she had been dropping hints that she was wealthy. She would talk about a nice car she drove or a nice trip she was taking. And then finally she says, the reason I'm able to afford all this is because I invest in cryptocurrency. And now our victim is in a situation where he loves her and trusts her and doesn't have any reason to believe that this is a scam because he spent all this time in a loving conversational situation with her. And so it doesn't hit him smack in the face like if you started within 3 days talking about cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Wow.
So
You mentioned, oh, sorry. So carry on.
Y- Yeah. So what I was going to say about it is, so ultimately he invests all of his money into a scheme that she recommends, and it's all fictitious. He believes he sees a website that looks very real, showing that he has gains and that his money is doubled. And so she encourages him to put more and more money into it. And before he knows it, he has all of his money in this. And when he tries to take money out of that, that's when the platform says, well, you owe taxes on that money. And he says, okay, take that out of my gains. And he's told, no, it has to be new money. And so then he's getting a loan because he thinks it's going to be a quick turnover.
Goodness.
And so became obvious to me that the level of what we were seeing was unlike anything we had ever seen before. And while he was the first victim, he was the first of a fire hose of victims that were getting hit with this. And it became clear that the American public was getting smacked in the face with scams that were engineered using very sophisticated psychological tactics to steal all of our money.
Right. And I remember you describing the how the victims are presented with these fake um websites showing their money increasing. And I was quite surprised by that as well, because like you said, they're very sophisticated. And also, like you mentioned, it's not just people messaging saying, hey, do you fancy an investment in this? They're spending that time and, gaining that trust, building these relationships. And so it's a 30-year-old software engineer, presumably a smart guy. It's not just someone making a silly choice or, like in a moment, like, oh, that was a bad decision. Yeah, they are very sophisticated. And even to that point of like creating fake websites so that you're seeing the supposed returns. And then, yeah, why wouldn't you want to either invest more or, yeah, or pay tax if you think there's going to be a quick turnaround. So I think it's important to understand the level of it, because I think a lot of people's initial reaction might be like, well, I wouldn't fall for something like that. Like, I'm quite street smart and savvy. But I think I've mentioned before on this podcast with an interview with someone else, but I read an article about a man whose job was, he was in it's some type of security role where he talks about it's his job to sort of prevent scams, like he advises on it. And he nearly got scammed himself. And he wrote an article about it. And it's like, wow, if someone like him, this is his whole world, it's his profession. If he could get that close, I think that's when it really changed my thinking of it, because I thought, well, it's not just about thinking that you're smart or that you're savvy. It really is that what you're up against is very sophisticated, and it's not really a reflection on you. It's just a reflection of how you know, I guess, well, these schemes are constructed now. So you mentioned about how it's a difference from before, and that people perhaps aren't just losing this one-time bulk of cash, but it's taking everything they have. And this is where the term pig butchering comes in. Could you please explain that to people that aren't familiar with that term?
Sure. And I just wanted to echo what you were saying in those remarks. We definitely dismiss things that we think can't happen to us. And so I really appreciate people like that security analyst, security researcher, because I read that article too. And I thought it was really important to normalize you are going to fall for a scam. You are going to get hit by a scam and it's going to be tailored to something that you will click on. And it happened to me. I think I spend all day, every day telling people not to click on things from people they don't know. And I'll give you an example. I was on LinkedIn with a victim who was really frustrated with feeling like nobody was paying attention to their crime. And I was trying to alleviate some of his frustration. But at the end of that conversation, I could tell he left the conversation still frustrated. In the next morning, it's pre-dawn and I'm scrolling on my phone and I see an email. And this email says, I don't think you actually care about victims. I think you're doing all of this to self-promote. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And he goes, so I wrote about it on my Facebook wall. And I was like, what? And I clicked on it. And that's it. That's how you target Erin West, right? Like you find the thing that will raise my adrenaline, create urgency, and I'll click on it. That's the thing. We cannot live in a life era that we're in where we're being inundated with scams and think it won't happen to me, because it
Hmm.
will. So I appreciate you
Wow.
bringing that up. That's super important.
Yeah, it's probably a very prevalent thought. I would have imagined among a lot of people, especially when the most prominent ones that you hear are like, oh, the Nigerian prince, and people think, oh yes, we're aware of these things now. It's like, no, this is like a different level. Things have changed a lot, and yeah, unfortunately for a lot of people, it's not until you realize. So yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that story as well, because this is obviously in your domain. Another one that I thought about recently or came across was like things like unsubscribe buttons, because you get emails from everyone's infiltrating your email, right? And I'm sure a lot of us, you want to keep it clean, you want to like lock that down. You're like, no, be I try and keep like unsubscribe where I can after, you buy a product or whatever. But I thought, well, that's clicking on a link, and a link from,
Well, that's interesting.
sometimes it is random
Right.
emails that you get through. And so I've changed my behavior on that now. Instead of clicking unsubscribe, I just report it as junk, through my email
That's smart,
client.
Lindsey.
So that was something recently too. I just had never thought about. It's such a normal behavior, but it's a link. It's clicking on links. So
You're totally right.
yeah, just all sorts of things I think you just don't even think about that can sneak up on you. So yeah, this is like these conversations are so important. So yes, pig butchering. This was when I got full body chills and was just, I mean, it was, yeah, frankly, really just disturbing, kind of horrifying moment of the talk. But I think it's a really important message to get out there to, again, sort of communicate kind of what level that these scammers are operating at now.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that, because I think that's the other piece that people don't get is they see these things on their phone and they think it's annoying and they think maybe it's a group of guys in a room in Nigeria. But the truth of the matter is this is happening at a massive scale. It's happening at an industrial level in primarily Southeast Asia, but that global footprint is growing. And what we know and what I've seen with my own eyes is that this is happening in, imagine a college dormitory, like a big, tall dorm, but imagine that dorm filled 6 to a room with people whose job, literally 16, 17 hours a day, is finding people like your listeners who, and trying to start conversations with them. And from there, they're going to hand off once they have a little bit of a conversation. Those people are the finders. They're going to hand off to the chatters. And the chatters are now going to spend up to 4 hours a day having these conversations with victims and building a trust. And then ultimately, they're going to hand off to the closers who are going to educate them about how to invest in this cryptocurrency platform. So it is a highly organized, highly sophisticated, targeted, time-tested technique that is draining billions and billions of dollars from the United States and many other countries. You gave us that statistic at the top of the podcast about 5 billion reported to the FBI. And we know that people experience a stigma with this, and they are embarrassed and they don't report. So we don't even know how big this problem is. People estimate it to be 65 billion. People estimate it to be 1 trillion, which seems like a ridiculously high number. But the fact is, it's a massive amount of money that has been transferred from people who worked for that all their lives, regular people, people that you go to church with, or your kid plays soccer with their kids. And it's being transferred into the hands of Chinese organized crime. And that's the reality, that this is a very strategic operation run by organized crime syndicates. And what's really important to understand is it's not getting any better anytime soon. There has been little to no disruption of their ability to do this work.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the stat as well, because you're right about not everyone reports, because yeah, they probably, there is a stigma that goes with that. And so yeah, the figure is likely a lot bigger than that. And then, like you mentioned, the scale of these operations, it's not just random people or a group of people in a room. I was really surprised to hear about the scale and the organization of this. And there's also a human trafficking element, you were saying, which again was just another disturbing element of this. Can you talk us through that? Because I think that's another thing. Well, I certainly wasn't aware of it. And um, yeah, talk us through how that works.
Definitely. I think part of why this particular crime, pig butchering, is so absolutely vile is when you first hear about it and you hear about financial crime victims whose heart is broken and who have lost everything they have. And then you find out, oh, this is happening in an organized scale by Chinese organized criminals. And then you come to find out that the people on the other side of the phone, who we like joke about, you know, uh, making their life more difficult and, using up their time, what we know is that these are human trafficked individuals. The way that they fill these college dormitory type buildings is that they are preying on a large unemployment situation in Southeast Asia initially. And what they knew was this all started in the COVID era, where people needed jobs and people didn't have jobs. And they offered them a high paying job doing what they thought was data entry in a live work environment. And the amount that they could earn was frequently 2 to 3 times what jobs pay where they live. And so it made it super attractive. And the way these organized criminals do the recruiting is very real. They have, they send you a typing test. They have interviews. They have multiple interviews, and then a big ceremonious, you got the job. And it comes with an airline ticket to Bangkok. And actually, I talked to a victim yesterday who had to fly himself to Bangkok. They get to
Wow.
Bangkok, they arrive, and they soon find out that this is not what they signed on for at all. Their phone is taken, their passport is taken, and they are put in um, they're confused. They think they were supposed to work in Bangkok, and now they're leaving Bangkok in a car, not knowing where they're going or what's happening to them. They are dropped off at a warehouse and put in another car, and then they get to a river and they are shuttled across a river, and essentially they're being kidnapped and forced into a organized crime. uh, I talked about the dormitories, but when you get there, it's a campus. And it's a campus of these buildings that are guarded with men with AK-47s. You are all of a sudden now you're a cog in a big factory. And if you don't agree to do this scamming, you are violently dealt with. And it's some of the most dramatic stories I've heard, like war crimes level violence being levied against people who say, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that to a fellow person. And so it really speaks to the sophistication of what's happening and the global piece of this. And just to say, I said that this was mostly happening in Southeast Asia, but because there is little to no friction uh, and disruption, they're growing. And we know that they've moved to Sri Lanka, they've moved to Peru, they've moved to United Arab Emirates. I was just on a call and they said that there was one in Pakistan. This is a global threat to our way of life. And people are being victimized on both sides. And the only winners are Chinese organized criminals. And they're winning with a staggering amount of money that is unprecedented worldwide.
Gosh, yeah, it's absolutely horrific and just heartbreaking for the people on the other side. And it's like just when you think, you know, these crimes that are happening, you're hearing these victim stories, and you're thinking, gosh, this is bad enough hearing about this. There's this added element of, oh, on the other side, it actually gets worse. There's this, there's actually a human trafficking element, and there's suffering on both sides. So, like you said, it is just absolutely vile and just truly shocking that there is a whole other side to this. So on the victim side, you know, is there we've talked through a couple of scenarios, but can you give us some examples of, who are the people getting scammed and what kind of emotional and financial toll do we see as a result of these scams?
It's an important question because it may not be what you think. You may have heard that this is mainly targeting the elderly. You may have heard that usually men are falling for this, or, old cat ladies or whatever. But the fact is, if you look at the statistics released by the FBI, there are more people under 60 than over 60 who are reporting this crime. The
Wow.
financial loss under 60 is more than over 60. So, so while we know absolutely this targets the elderly, it also targets 25-year-olds who are getting dropped into a WhatsApp chat that appears to be being led by a professor teaching you how to invest in cryptocurrency. I'll give you an example of that. So I spoke with a 25-year-old who had just graduated from college, and I think there's a lot of interest in cryptocurrency, especially with this new administration. And people have FOMO. They want to be part of it and they want to understand it. That they that people don't totally understand crypto. And here I'm 25. I got lucky enough to get dropped into this chat, and this guy seems like a legitimate professor. And I've been in these chats where they have groups of, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 people in this chat, most of whom are part of the scam. And this professor will drop daily nuggets about cryptocurrency. And for the most part, they're actually helpful pieces of information about what's happening in crypto. And so they probably just asked ChatGPT like what's new in crypto, and they paste it in, but they're legitimate pieces of information that are helpful to people who are trying to understand cryptocurrency. But then along with these nuggets, they are threading into it. Also, the professor will, there's always an assistant, Daisy, who's young and attractive. And Daisy will say, well, the professor's going to come on today and tell us when the windows are to buy cryptocurrency. Excuse me.
Uh, bless you.
And so people think that, oh yeah, this is a legitimate professor and he has some intuition and some knowledge about when the best time is. And people who are novices can can believe that. And this poor young man lost all of his savings, which, while the number might be small, that's the common part of this is you're going to lose everything you have. And so that's going to hurt you just as much at 25. Well, the fact is, it's going to be devastating to lose all of your money. And so it makes sense to keep that in mind when we only have time to investigate $15 million cases or whatever, that there are people on the lower end of the financial loss scale who are equally devastated.
Hmm. Absolutely. And can you talk us through why the term pig butchering is used for these scams?
Yeah, so a lot of people take issue with the term pig butchering because they think it's offensive. I'll tell you exactly where it came from. When taking you back to COVID era, Chinese gangsters started realizing the interest in gambling from the Chinese. And they thought, well, why don't gambling's not is not legal in China. So they thought, well, why don't we build casinos in driving distance from the Chinese border? And so they built a bunch of casinos in Cambodia. Then COVID hit, people aren't traveling, and they think, okay, well, what are we going to do with all this space? And we need to make money. So they think, okay, well, let's do a scam that we've created called Sha Zhu Pan. And it is a Chinese term and it means pig butchering. The idea, let's fatten up the pig, the victim. Let's fatten them up with love bombing, make them feel taken care of, and then we will slit the throat of the pig and take all of their money. And that's the concept. So it's vile, and it refers to victims as pigs. And so there are some people who don't like it. What I will say is that we don't have to like it. We don't have to like the term, but we have to use it. And
Hmm.
here's why. It's my job right now to make sure that everybody knows about this. And if I start talking to you and tell you I want to come on your podcast and talk about financial grooming, that may not sound very interesting to you. But if I tell
Hmm.
you I've got a great story and it's about pig butchering, you're going to say, what is this woman talking about? And that's my job. My job is to make people stop and think, what is this? And could this be happening to someone in my family?
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. I just got the chills all over again. Because it certainly had that impact when I heard you talk about it, and just um, the heartlessness of it all, let's yeah, build them up and then take everything that they have, and not just, one hit, but like multiple, like, okay, we've got an investment and now we're going to get, so-called taxes, and just keep going until they have nothing left. So it's also just the total devastation part as well. It's just so brutal and so shocking, and just so, I just can't even imagine, a person experiencing that, everything you've worked so hard for, taken away. And in such the emotional toll of that as well, especially if you thought you were in this relationship and that you were starting something. I mean, that just going through breakups is obviously can be really difficult, but couple that with financial devastation, and that's just an incredibly tough thing emotionally to go through. So thank you for sharing where the term comes from as well, because I think it does speak to just the how horrific this all is. Like you said, I think it would be a disservice to almost have like a sugar coated term for it because it wouldn't really match. So you mentioned that you've seen these compounds or campuses with your own eyes. I saw a video that you posted about you going. I was like, oh my goodness, you're actually there. I think that was so incredibly brave of you to actually, go to where this is happening and visit the location of it was a raided compound, correct? Can you tell us a bit about what that experience was like, actually being on the ground, seeing where this is happening?
Yeah. eh, Um, I've been to Asia 5 separate times to look at these places, and but I but the one you're talking about was in the Philippines, and I'm really grateful to there's a commission, an anti-organized crime commission that has been set up with the president that allowed me access to these raided compounds. So just to explain what is happening in the Philippines, same type of situation as what's happening that I've already described, but also happening in Metro Manila, like happening in the heart of the city and happening blocks from the US Embassy and blocks from their city hall and happening really in plain sight. So the first building that they took me through, they have now repurposed as a government office. It is a former scam site, and it looks like a former scam site. It is a block-long building with guard gates and bars over the windows, and it's very obvious as you walk by that that's not a place where people are free to come and go. And so to be on the inside of it and realize that when you're inside, like the construction of this was to be a scam center. Like this is not a repurposed building. This is a place that was built to be a scam center. And so what that means is on some floors, there are bedrooms that house the human trafficked workers that are meant to do this. On some floors, there are big office rooms that just look like a big cafeteria room, but they have tables that are set up with all kinds of wiring and computers, and that's where the that's where the work was done. And they would have offices off to the side that were for the big boss. There was a gong in one of them that people could hit when they successfully stole money. But then here's where it gets even more eerie and creepy. There is an element to this that you have to motivate people to do this dirty work because most people would never, if they had their choice, steal from another person, and the way they do it is so invasive. I wouldn't steal from you by becoming your best friend or someone you fall in love with and then take your money. So to get people to do that, you've either got to give them a carrot or a stick. And so inside this building was both. Inside this building on the ground floor, there was a torture room, and there was a metal bar where you could handcuff people to that metal bar and beat them with baseball bats or an electric baton. I saw
Oh
that.
my goodness.
I saw the locks on the outside of that room to lock people inside. But then there's the carrot. And I also saw the rooms that were brothels. And there was a place there called the aquarium where they would have sex workers inside that aquarium, and people who had done well could choose from those sex workers to spend the night. They had a massive KTV studio, which is like a karaoke room, where there were 8 separate, fully built out, high end plush rooms with that were stocked with liquor and also sex workers. That the debauchery of what was happening in that compound was really even mm, as as a human more difficult to see than the rooms where the scams were happening. That like this is how you motivate people to do it, by going to their most base human needs, and sort of like just actually using the same processes that you're using on the victims, giving them love, attention, which is similar to what they were providing them by these sex workers. And let's not for 1 minute forget that these people were trafficked in and then used for prostitution. I mean, it's a it's a it's an ugly, ugly business.
My gosh, I bet that was really quite something to have to go and witness that firsthand. It's just another added layer to this, yeah, this horrific industry. Just, I mean, yeah, it keeps this just keeps, getting worse and worse hearing about this. Just another layer of,
It
you
really
said,
does.
ugliness. Um,
And
wow, yeah.
if I could tell you one more piece of that, so that was one of the places that I got to see. The other was a campus. It was a 35 building campus that was an hour and a half out of Manila. That was the biggest operation I've ever seen. And this one was really left relatively intact from the way it was when they disrupted it. So if you went into these rooms, you could see the notebooks on the tables that the scammers were using. You could flip through and you could say, oh, they were targeting people from the UK. Oh, this person's from Ireland. And you could see their notes. It and that place also had villas for the big bosses. And so to walk through and seeing the flagrant spending that these big bosses were doing to celebrate themselves was really hard to look at, knowing the victims I've talked to who've lost their life savings, that this is where it is. It's in a Hermes bag in this big boss's wife's closet.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you've really seen all the pieces of this from the victim side, the people being forced to carry out the scams, where they're living, how they're being forced to do this, and then ultimately the results of the people orchestrating these scams and where the money ends up. Gosh. So yeah, just a full, complete view of that. Well, let's talk about Operation Shamrock, which you have founded and created in order to, um, help uh, go after these networks. So can you tell us what it is and how it works and about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you about this. When I left my job as a prosecutor, I retired because I saw that this problem was too big to handle from where I was sitting. And I wanted to have more impact on something that is a major international crisis. So I could see that in order to fix this, it would require a coalition of people cross sectors, and that nothing gets done until everybody starts walking together toward the cause of this problem. Shamrock is made up of different working groups, are very I'd say it's very victim focused on both sides. That we want victims to be able to come into a law enforcement agency and be heard, be not ridiculed, not be told that there's nothing that they can do. So one of the things we've done is we've built capacity in local and state law enforcement. We've built a group of 2,500 active analysts, detectives, prosecutors who we do webinars monthly. We've had 2 major conferences, give go-bys and best practices to really enable local law enforcement to be able to use the blockchain as the investigative tool that it should be. And we've been able to put tools in their hands. We've been able to give them training, and we've really made an impact in building capacity nationwide in law enforcement. And so we took that idea toward banking, and we started building a banking group to do the same type of work, to really educate the front line about this is what's happening out there, this is what it will look like when it comes through your doors, and here are some real ideas about what you can do to stop that money from flowing out your doors. We meet with victims regularly. This is a big piece of what we do, to understand what is happening on the ground floor, and then to provide that information back to law enforcement and banking in terms of, hey, local banks, or hey, big bank, you had a victim drive through 9 branches of your bank in the Bay Area, taking out a little bit of money from each one. And at the end of the day, she's got $90,000 in cash. Why did you not catch that? It just pieces of
Mhm.
this that perhaps if you are provided information about what's happening and in real time, perhaps that will help you set strategies that won't do that. And finally, we're very active in trying to make sure that it's safe for victims out there. We've taken a role in trying to legislate better laws to protect consumers from crypto ATMs and we've been really successful in that. I think the world is not happy about crypto ATMs existing, but if they're going to exist, then let's make them safer for our people. So
Mhm.
and then what's dearest to my heart is being involved in the international community to really look at how this is happening. And personally, I feel like my role is best served in awareness and getting out there and telling these stories. So I'm so grateful that you would allow me to share this with your listeners. This is an important part of the work I do. So I'm really touched that you've opened a door of lots of new people who might be hearing about this for the first time.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad to. I think when you just hear what's happening and the level of devastation, like you said, awareness is such an important factor in hopefully helping prevent for the prevention part before you become a victim and then have to, yeah, I guess, go through the process of moving on from there. But I love how you've taken the approach of sort of acknowledging all these different pieces. There's the law enforcement aspect, the responsibility on the banking side. There's a tech element, the investigative part, and then victim services. You're just having a place where someone can go and feel like they're being heard and seen, and that something can actually be done, and it will be a welcoming place and not a judgmental place. And you're sort of putting all those pieces together in order to support victims and hopefully prevent more scams like this from happening. So working with all of these different groups, what progress have you seen so far, and then also what support you know is still needed to be done?
I can definitely see a progression from where I started in 2022 to where we sit today. As time has gone by, the level of knowledge about what's happening has gone up. The level of interest from Congress into what is happening has gone up. I I spoke before Congress, gosh, almost a year ago now, and when I was there, it was clear to me that a lot of people didn't even understand that this was happening in their jurisdiction. And so I would say that more and more victims are getting louder and victims are letting their congressional representatives know about this. Victims are speaking to the media and getting heard. So more and more, we are raising the temperature on this is a crisis and we need to look at it. I would say that law enforcement capacity is better than it was 3 years ago. But I would say with all of this, all these things that I can say are better, they're better, but we still have a long way to go. We're not anywhere near actually being a threat to this scam industry. And and so it just really it mandates that everybody do more. And every one thing I always say is like, look around your own business and figure out what you can do 1% better today. And even if it's not your business, even if it's talking to your neighbor as you're out grabbing the mail and just say, you know what, I heard this woman talking about these scams. So do you know about this? We've got to do something every day to make our world safer because it's not even a close call right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great to hear that there has been progress and that awareness is, there is more awareness out there. But yes, there's definitely, it sounds like there are ways to go, especially if the organizations are, like you mentioned earlier, if they're growing and they're not really being stifled at the moment. Is there anything you're particularly focused on for the rest of this year, or anything any initiatives in particular?
Gosh, which one to talk about? So I would say I started a podcast. My podcast is called Stolen. I'm and in that I'm telling the stories. I'm having the guests on who can. My podcast is designed for regular people to understand more about what's happening and what's behind that scam that they're getting on their phone. And so I'm going to continue to work on awareness, and I'm going to talk about it every chance I get. I would say that we're also really, as a group, focused on doing more training of banking to put actual concrete training in place that is used in banks about what's happening. We're definitely focused on the international component and what can be done to raise the alarm that we have thousands of people in captivity who are being forced to do this work, and really raise the temperature that this is the new slavery. This is 2.0. We're watching it happen. We know it's happening, and we've got to do something about it. So I would say it's a constant. It's little things every day. I mean, we all understand little things every day, and it's little things every day toward awareness, building capacity, and creating a response, but also looking at what can be done about the head of the snake. What can be done to disrupt that enterprise, to make it more expensive, more difficult, and more time consuming for them to do this work.
Mhm. And so if someone has experienced is a victim of one of these scams, what can they do? Where can they go to receive support?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is they should report it to the FBI on the FBI portal, because that's how we get a measure, a baseline of how big the problem is. They should also report it to their local jurisdiction, because that's how we let them know that this problem is happening in their community. But if they have not been if they're not getting help in either of those places, then I would encourage them to go to the operationshamrock.org website. There is a place on the very front page of that website where you can report a scam, and our law enforcement detectives will look at your lost funds, your stolen funds, and we will get back to you and give you an answer. And in addition to that, we do meet with victims to talk about what's happened to them. And then there's a full reference page for victims to get themselves into um, support groups that are run by AARP or some of our other partners that can provide a soft landing for them when it feels like nobody understands them.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think just knowing that they have somewhere that they'll be heard, because I guess, like you said, depending on whether it's um, the dollar amount of the loss, or even just, resources on the law enforcement side, sometimes I guess these things don't always get looked into. So that's amazing that there's another place they can go. And then there's also that support element as well, as we've talked about it, the emotional toll. I can't imagine must be so great for people that have lost everything. And then also, especially if there was a personal relationship they believe they had as well. It's just, doubly hard. And what about for people that are also listening that want to, is there anything they can do to help, or to support Operation Shamrock as well?
Thank you so much for asking. So, one piece of good news, we are now a 501(c)(3). And so it took longer than I thought to become a nonprofit. So, donations are a wonderful way to show support. But I will also say that there are plenty of opportunities to put some muscle into doing something about it. And we do a train the trainer. We have a slide deck that if you come and you spend an hour with us, well, we do our train the trainer um, webinar, then you can take our slide deck and you can go train your train from your library or train your book club. So there are ways to get involved that way. And frankly, we need people who are mission driven and care about this. And if you have a special talent, maybe you speak Mandarin, maybe you are a graphic designer and you want to be part of what we're doing, then there is a place on the website to tell us what your special skills are. So we are grateful for support of any kind, and really appreciate people who want to be part of this important mission.
What a fantastic program and a brilliant idea, train the trainer, so people can actually go somewhere to get the right information and resources for that, so they can um, share in their communities. And I love the idea as well of just doing like a session at, whether it's like a local book club or any sort of community that people are part of. Um, you know, using those groups as a way to spread awareness. Well, is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap today?
No, just gratitude to you for spending an hour with me and making this part of the awareness that you put out into the world. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so happy to do this, and it's been so incredible talking to you today. And I just think there's such a, um, like we've said, that I think a lot of people either don't realize just how sophisticated scams are these days, or we think we have a certain, like, oh, that won't happen to us, like, we're savvy, and there just isn't an awareness of how bad things are um at the moment. So just so happy to help talk about this, and yeah, just share the information of how sophisticated and large, these organizations are. And hopefully with more awareness, we can get the word out there for victims who can get the right support, and also help on the prevention side with more people getting involved, to work, against these organizations. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Erin, and thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I think you're so incredible and so brave in so many ways, especially just going and being on the ground in these places. So yeah, very grateful to you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you for coming on the show. All right, well, that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast for more insights from the leaders shaping the future of crypto and Web3. We'll see you on the next episode.